And thank you for coming. I know that it's a beautiful day, and sometimes just showing up is an act of service, right? Because you think, oh, look at it out here. I could be doing this or I could be doing that. And I understand that. I get that. And I also want to say, especially to you, that it really, gathering together is really an act of service, just by itself. You know, have you ever just thought like this, just like maybe when you come to church, you may not do anything, you may not even be having a good day, but just you see people that you haven't seen, you were maybe thinking about them. You ever had that, just being around people that encourages you? And maybe I'm terrible that day, but you just think, well, it was still worth going because I saw so-and-so and they kind of encouraged me. And that's good. That's good stuff. So I'm just trying to tell you that, you know, we used to call these times in churches a worship what? Service. And because we're offering worship to God, obviously, but we're also in a way serving one another. We're serving each other in this experience, singing together, learning together, just being together. And so we're in this series called Serve It Up, and there's going to be, we'll have more people be involved in this as we go along, but really today we want to talk about the ultimate example. Like, what does that really look like? And this is really all about serving God by serving others. You know, a lot of times we want to we forget that we really serve God. Most of what we do in serving God is as we serve other people. We do that. And you see throughout the scripture, especially the New Testament, that the service of God, the service in our lives was how we ministered to one another. And it is difficult to serve. There's a nobility to serving, the way the Bible talks about. There's a nobility to serving in silence. That means not self-promoting, not being self-promoting. We live in a culture where that's really rare. Now, we have a lot of people that serve in this church that you would never know anything about them. They're super quiet, and they want it that way. And unless I really insisted on them, like saying something, or I insisted on saying, hey, I want to talk about you because I want to encourage someone, or I want to tell other people how they can be a part of, get involved in serving other people. I mean, sometimes you just got to do that. But I want to tell you that we have, you come by the church and it's all mowed and the grounds are really nice. Well, those aren't just done by, like little elves at night or something. Those are done by people that never say anything, and they like it that way. They're usually in the early service, like Carolyn and Jack, and also for Sue and Rick Hill, and they do all this work, and there's lots of others of you that help too. But it's their service, and they're serving you by doing that. Some other people, we have people that have worked in preschool or in the nursery for years and years and years. They don't really want to be singled out, but they've done it, and they continue to do it. And of course, they need some help because they're going to get tired. Just like our grounds people, we don't want to just find them laying over dead on the tractor. We all need, if we all step up and do a little bit, then we have an opportunity to make this even more of a joy for ourselves and for them. As I said, we live in a day of self-promoters, social climbers, Facebook exhibitionists, people that really, if serving has to be done, it'll be done reluctantly, and if it is done at all, they should get some recognition. They'll be taking a picture of, here I am picking up litter, And they should get, at least 100 likes on anything they do. A t-shirt particularly, maybe, and I'm not saying it's not it's a bad thing to recognize people and encourage them. Even Jesus didn't say never mention your service. Jesus just said, don't do it for yourself. Don't promote yourself. He said, let another person's lips praise you and not your own. And it's easy, though, to get into the trap where we begin to serve expecting or promoting praise or recognition. It's hard to break out of it. And like I said, sometimes we need to say something because we're trying to encourage others, but Jesus was always with his disciples, going after that heart of selfish ambition that all of us wrestle with. And it really steals all the joy out of doing anything for God. It's a huge trap that we can get into. There's always a little bit of us, ourself, in almost anything. But Jesus was always trying to help those guys, his closest friends and followers, to conquer this agenda that we can end up in. You know, just being religious and knowing a lot about the Bible and going to church does not mean you can't fall to the agenda of wanting recognition and wanting greatness. Like my friend said one time, I appreciated somebody was introducing him and giving him this big long, he has done this and he's done that and he wrote this book. And then at the end, I really loved his little line. He said, I'm going to thank so-and-so for introducing me, for lying so much. And I'm going to ask God to forgive him for lying and forgive me for loving it so much. So all of us can be a little bit like that. And we can be prone to our own agendas. This is not just true with you and maybe your job or your work or your family or church. It's true in ministry. It happens. People are like competing with each other, just like Jesus' disciples. He had to regularly deal with this because they were arguing about who was going to be greatest and who was going to get the best position and who was going to, get the most recognition, whatever that looks like. But it's an amazing thing to see how Jesus taught. I mean, Jesus teaches in such a, and this passage I'm going to share with you, I think it's more of a teachable moment. It's like Jesus, he's like, there's this moment where it's obvious he needs to teach these guys something. And we'll see it together. And so it's a pretty long, but see how he teaches them. It's like hands-on, very tactile. He wants them to really get this because, listen, folks, not just for them, but for us. If we do not get this part of really understanding his example, we're never going to really, if what we do, in the ways that we do serve, they're going to lack the joy that is supposed to come with it. So look in John chapter 13, and let me read this to you. I'm going to read the passage. It's a narrative, and then we'll go back through it quickly and look at some things that we can take from it, okay? Starting at verse 1. Now, before the feast of Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from supper and laid aside his garments. Taking a towel, he girded himself. And then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. So he came to Simon Peter. He said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus said to him, what I do, you do not realize now, but you will understand hereafter. Peter said to him, never shall you wash my feet. Jesus answered to him, if I do not wash you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, then wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, he who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew the one who was betraying him. For this reason, he said, not all of you are clean. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is the one sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." It's an amazing scene that we see here. Jesus is with his disciples. You know, in that day, they would they had public baths where they would, because they didn't have indoor plumbing. And then they'd walk from wherever they had come through the streets. And it would usually be like, you know, there's camels and donkeys. It's in the streets in an ancient city. And people throw their stuff out in the street. Your feet would get really nasty. And so then they would go into a place, and they would always have somebody, either a servant if they were wealthier, or the kind of the person the lowest on the pecking order, would wash the feet of the people that came in so they could prepare to eat. Well, what we can imagine here is that Jesus comes in, and these guys are all there, and nobody's going to do it. They're all looking around like, who's going to do this? You get the tension. And so the question we see, Jesus uses this opportunity to drive home a point, to teach them something. As a matter of fact, Peter reacted to Jesus so much because it was so inappropriate for him to do it from their thinking. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we follow the ultimate example, being Jesus? Because what he said, I've done this to show you something. And the other question is, how can we really joyfully take a humbling kind of job, kind of a dirty job, without longing to be noticed or promoted or to get something from it? How do we do that? Because this is really, in the end, he says, happy are you if you do them. Blessed are you if you do them. You know, you can do a lot of service and not be very happy about it. So, how can we do this? I'm going to give you 3 things that I think we could kind of walk away from this that I think are very practical, and I want you to see them. And they might kind of surprise you a little bit. Number 1, the first thing you have to do, if you are going to really be able to serve people with freedom and joy, no matter what the situation, you have to know your place. You really do. It's important. You know, we tend to avoid jobs for a couple of reasons. We avoid serving for a couple of reasons, I would say, and you find it in this passage. And you also find there's a reason why Jesus had total freedom to just serve anybody, no matter what was asked to do. The first thing we struggle with is we think we're too good to have to serve. Now, we would not say that, but we think we're above it, or we should be above it. So let me ask you a question. What's a job you just hate to do? Like, if there's any way you can just ignore it or avoid it, you'll do it. Come on. Be honest. What? Cleaning the toilet. Okay. We had a guy in the early service who was responsible for keeping the sewer running in one of the local cities. I think he's got us all over that. Okay. All right. Somebody else? Something you just hate doing it. Dishes. This has come up a lot. Okay, vacuuming. You don't like that? Go ahead. Somebody? Painting. Okay. You're terrible at it? Or you just do it terribly so nobody asks you to do it? The masking, and yeah, it's tedious, isn't it? Okay. Somebody else. It's just like if there's I'm not going to do that. You just avoid it, even if it's something that needs to be done. This could be in your job. This could be in your work. You know, this is not my responsibility. Why should I have to do it? I'm the boss, or I've paid my dues. I've done my time. I shouldn't have to do this stuff. You know what I'm talking about? This is where we get. I'm too good for this. This is exactly what was going on with the disciples, right? They were like, hey, why should we I think that Andrew should do it. They're thinking, are they doing what we do, right? We're scorekeeping. Do you do that? You know what scorekeeping is? It's like you always have a calculator running. It's in your marriage, it's with your kids, you're calculating, I did that for them, and so I should get some remuneration for this. Right? It's really hard to break out of this. The problem with scorekeeping, as I've said many times, is what? Your math is always off. You're always way ahead in the score, right? You're like massively out there. You're like so far ahead, you're just like, you resent it. And so here's how it works out. You can end up being, you ever had this happen where you're doing something, but deep down you kind of just resent it? You're just like, I can't believe I have to do this. This is terrible. And do you think your attitude comes through? Probably. Do you enjoy it? Do you get anything out of it? No. Or have you ever had somebody do that for you? Like, they do something for you and you wish you wouldn't have had them do it for you because they make you feel so bad about it? Like the Bible says, don't eat the bread of a selfish man so you don't throw it all up later and regret it and after you wasted all your compliments. There's a lot of truth to that. But think about this. It's hard to not get a superior attitude. I don't know why this is doing this again, but you think, well, why should I have to do it? I'm the man. Or why should I have to do it? You kids need to do everything. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there isn't, like, you can't have a plan for who does what. But what I'm saying is that's a matter of organization. That's not a matter of attitude. Could be your coworkers. I've done this. I did that. You expect me to go back and have to start over? I did that when I was an apprentice. Or how about people that disappoint you, that let you down, that maybe have been really hurt you, and you have some resentment, and now you have to try not to. You're supposed to serve them. Think about Jesus. Jesus got ready to wash the feet of Judas. Now, before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing his hour had come that he would depart out of this world, it says that the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, having loved them to the end, during supper, the devil, having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from the supper and laid aside his garments, taking a towel, he girded himself. So Jesus was washing the feet of Judas. So you can think you're too good, but Jesus wasn't. Or the other thing that is sometimes just as common that'll keep you from serving is your own insecurity. You think you're too bad. So you don't want to look like a desperate loser that's just trying to do stuff to make people happy or just to go along, to get along. You don't want to do that. You don't want to get involved in it because maybe it'll be, maybe you will, you're already down on yourself enough. So why would I take this rotten job? It's degrading. It's demeaning. What will people think? Here I should be doing this, and here I'm still stuck in this. How will I look? And you see, how was Jesus able to serve like this? How was Jesus able to do it? The Bible says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. How was Jesus able, in the middle of that deep disappointment, betrayal, that he was still able to serve? Well, here's why. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from supper, laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself. You see, it was what was in the inside of Jesus that made him able to do the outside. Here's God in the flesh, the creator of the universe, and he's going to serve. He didn't need to impress anybody, you see. Jesus knew who he was. You see, when you know who you are in the Lord, that apart from him you're hopeless, but in him you're fully accepted and loved and forgiven and empowered. When you know who you are in the Lord, there's no problem here. You don't have to worry about it. And Jesus also knew where he came from, that he'd come forth from God. He knew his own journey. He knew his purpose. And he also knew where he was going. He was secure in his identity and his purpose in life. So he was free of all the things that you and I fall into. We get all worried about comparisons. And Jesus had one person he was focused on pleasing. That was the Father. I only do those things which please the Father. That was his confession. And you know, if you don't get this inside part done, that you know who you are, then you're always going to be trying to prove yourself, trying to exalt yourself, trying to protect yourself. If you don't know where you've come from, if you don't have a grip on that, if you don't know really where you're going and what your purpose is, you're never going to really be able to do this kind of service joyfully. And you're never going to be able to serve like the ultimate example. That's why when Jesus, it said, had washed their feet and taken his garments, he reclined at the table and he said to them, "Do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet." I don't think Jesus was, I mean, I know that different church traditions do foot washing and it's beautiful and it has its place. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I don't really think that was the point. I really don't see that was really what was going on here. I think Jesus saw that this was another example of their unwillingness, of their whole agenda of competition and comparison, and he was doing a teachable moment. Jesus was trying to show them that if I'm the teacher and I can do this, you need to be able to do this. No one is any better or any worse than you or me. We can just serve each other. The ground at the cross is level. And I think that Jesus, you see, here's why I'm saying that. Let's say I said tonight at 7, we're going to have a foot washing service. All of you go get a pedicure. You get yourself you'd make sure, I don't want any, I'm going to exfoliate right now because I don't want to have nasty looking feet. You see, that was not what was going on here. Your identity has to be rooted in him. It's okay if you get people appreciate what you do, but sometimes you have to do it independent of that. No one or nothing else should be the center of your identity. The second thing, if you're going to be able to really serve and you're going to be able to do this joyfully, you have to notice what's needed. You have to see. You have to notice. You have to make a point of noticing. John wrote later in reflecting on the gospel in 1 John 3:17, he says, "But whoever has the world's good and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him?" He says, if you see the need and close your heart, how do you demonstrate God's love that way? But it's easy to do, isn't it? You can be so busy or focused on your position or the project that you're involved in, whether religious or otherwise, or your place, that you don't really see the needs around you. You don't really see these are needs. And I don't think it's intentional. I don't think most of us get tunnel vision or don't see needs on purpose. I think it just happens. Life happens. And here's a basic truth. If you look for needs, you'll see them. It's that simple. If you look for needs, you'll see them. And here's why we have a hard time looking. Because when you're looking at yourself all the time, you aren't going to see them. When you're looking at yourself all the time, or you're keeping score all the time, running your internal calculator on how you're measuring up to everybody else, you're not going to really see the needs around you. You know why Jesus washed his disciples' feet? Because they were stinky. That's it. There was a need right then. They hadn't done it. They didn't want to do it. So Jesus is going to use it as a way to teach. And so that didn't mean that Jesus was starting a career as a foot washer. He knew what his real objective was. You know, servant leaders do things not because it's their expertise. You know, I think it's good to work within your area of gifting. That's great. But that doesn't exclude that you still have to serve wherever you see needs. Maybe there's some things you're better at than others, or maybe you're going to be the person that knows how to get a hold of the person that can meet that need. And that doesn't mean that you just get to serve in the areas that you find comfortable or interesting. What you have to do is look around for needs and try to get them met. Maybe, like I said, you're just looking. So that could be, what would that be at your house? Dishes. Somebody loves every service, people hated dishes. Or childcare. We have people that do it, like I said, childcare. Well, you don't have to wait around till you always feel like that. Some of you that we're trying to serve here, if you want to, you're saying, hey, I really want to have great childcare. Well, you know what? If everybody jumps in on that and sees that as a need that needs to be served, then everybody can find the joy of service and nobody's going to get destroyed by having to do it all the time. We have lots of needs around us, like different family members of mine have worked at the Lewis County Gospel Mission. You know, it's across from Dairygold there. They work with hundreds of homeless people every week. They feed them every day during the week. They have a clothes closet where they need people to come in and sort out the clothes and figure out how to give them away and help them. And you know, you don't have to be a retail expert. You just call them up and say, hey, I got a few hours this week. Could I do that? And they'll work you in if they can. And there's a need there. You understand? There's like maybe under a dozen people that just basically do it all. But there's a need there, and you could be a part of that. You know, if you live in Chehalis, it's 5 minutes from anywhere in Chehalis. And if you live in Toledo, it's maybe 20, 25 minutes. And you say, well, I don't want to work with those people. I understand. And it's not my job to, direct you. But you look around and see the needs that God is directing you toward. You know, I know, Diana, you're working with Safe Ministries. We have we all have family members or friends or people we know. I bet there's not one person here who doesn't know somebody whose life has been tipped over by addiction. And yet we have a Christian-based residential treatment program for, it's really a life-changing program for women and their kids in Chehalis. And they need all kinds of things. They need help, but do all kinds of stuff. And I'm going to get you in on this. We'll talk about this sometime in the next month or so. But what I'm saying to you is, but you look around for needs and you find them. And it maybe it's your house, maybe in your own home. You just have so many needs there. You got to focus on that right now. That's okay. Serving your kids or serving the people around your life or in your neighborhood. I don't know. But if you don't look for needs, you will not see needs. So you have to notice them. And then the third thing is really this. Do your part. You do your part. You don't have to do my part, and I don't have to do your part, but you do your part. Here's what Jesus said. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, neither is the one sent greater than the one who sent him. Jesus is saying, Jesus is the king of the universe, and he's willing to wash feet. He's saying, if I'm willing to take this job that none of you guys would do, you need to step. You need to have a rearrangement in your heart about this. And I know that you can feel like, well, I don't want to make people helpless, and I don't want to enable people, and I don't want to create codependency. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying, notice the needs, and then you pray about what is the need. What is going to help them be the best person possible? And the reality is nobody can do everything. Some people try to do everything. Nobody's good at everything or able to do everything. But everybody can do something, and that's how the body's supposed to work, that everybody does something. And maybe at this stage of your life, you can't do as much because you have so many other expectations and demands. But everybody can do something, and you could do it at work, and you could do it at home, and you could do it at school, and you could do it. You don't have to, like I said, you see trash on the ground, you don't have to call for the trash picker-upper committee. Just do it. So you want to serve with the joy of Jesus? Serve God by start by serving the people in your life that are right next to you right now. Because the way we serve God is by serving other people. Some of you do it in your job. You're in education or medicine or some other area, or maybe it's the employees that work for you or around you. I don't know. But you'll find a way to do this as you begin to notice the needs around you. And then you serve it up. You're putting it out there every day. And you know your place in him. You've settled that. You're not too bad. I'm not too bad to do this, and I'm not too good for this. If Jesus would serve, I could serve. And if you begin to trust him in this, he will begin to use you in ways you've never expected. You start paying attention to needs in your family and with your siblings, with your parents, with your kids, with your friends. All of a sudden, God begins to show you what you can do. You notice people. You notice they're alone, or they're isolated, or they're discouraged. And maybe it's not going to be actually doing something. It's just spending time with them, or talking to them, or praying for them, or sharing the gospel with them. You know, the people you're dealing with, they might not have dirty feet. They might have dirty clothes. Or what's the means of transportation now? Cars. Maybe they have a dirty car. Maybe you need to get your car washing mitt out. I don't know. You just make this application. But you do something. And when you see a need, you do something. You're not, and I know you're afraid of. You're like, well, if I watch their kids this week, what if they show up at my house next week and want me to watch their kids until they're 18? Well, that's when you talk to them. You say, I have an appointment today. I did not sign a contract to do this for the rest of my life. I said I would cover you last week, but we're going to have to work with this. I may or may not be able to do this. What I'm saying is, you're serving God by serving others. And you can start right now. You don't have to wait. There's plenty of needs around you if you look. And here's what Jesus said. If you know these things, you are blessed if you think about them. Is that what he said? Did he say, if you know these things, you are blessed if you do a special study on this? No. He said, if you know these things, you're happy, you're blessed, you're joyful if you do them. You know, as the Apostle John reflected back on the Gospel of John, listen to what he said, 1 John 3:16. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and truth. You see, this is why we celebrate the Lord's Supper. We are told to take this on a regular basis. Why? Because it kind of brings us back to a time of powerful and deep intentional remembering of the life, of the service life of Jesus. That we can look at that and we can say, look at him. Look at what he did. You see, if he laid down his life for us, shouldn't we lay down our lives for one another? This is why we do it. And so we try and do it on a regular basis to bring us back to say, hey, I want to, in a very tangible way. He gave us, this cup and the bread in a way through taste and texture and touch. We can be reminded deeply, even in our own bodies, that this is a priority. This is the measure. This is the ultimate example of how we serve people. And Jesus humbled himself, as we'll talk about next week. even to the cross. And so we take this to do two things, to remember and to remind ourselves of what his example is, and remind ourselves of what our heart needs to be. And to also celebrate what this really means for us, that he took bread and the night in which he was betrayed, and he said, this is my body, which is given for you. In other words, he's saying, I lived my life in this body for you. I came and I taught and I preached and I healed and I served. I washed feet, and not just that, I went to the cross. And then he says, we are in the same manner, we take the cup and we're reminded that this is his blood that is poured out because he gave us more than just an example. He gave us redemption. He gave us forgiveness. He gave us the fact that no matter how messed up you've been and how badly you've blown it in life, you can be completely forgiven and cleansed. He wants you to remember that. And so can other people. We have to remember that. That's what he did. And so, but you need to be ready for it. And you need to kind of take a look at your life and say, what's been going on in my inner life? Because I'm doing the right stuff, but my heart just isn't there. Or maybe your heart isn't there, but you're not doing the right stuff either. And so I would encourage you to examine yourself, and I want you to take this little card, if you would. This is one of the tools that we can use to kind of do that, and to say, you put your name on it, and if you want us to contact you, a way we can contact you. You might have a prayer request, but there are some specific steps in this that I want you to look at. And the first one would be, I want to surrender to Jesus and learn my place before him. You see, you don't want to take we want you to take the Lord's Supper, but the Lord's Supper is for those who have done that who are publicly saying, I really have surrendered to Jesus, and I want him to be the example in my life. I want to follow him. I want to deeply remember and celebrate his death on the cross so that I can be reminded deeply of the priorities of my life. And so if you haven't done that, please do that today. Give your life to him today. You need him. You're not gonna be able to do it on your own. He has to change your heart, and he will. Pray, I will see the needs around me. Well, if you start to pray, and we'll pray along with you to see needs, you'll start seeing them. And then pray, I will have the courage to do my part starting now. Yeah, we will pray for you, but you may see things that you can't really do everything about, but you could do maybe a little bit. You start right now. And then, I want to be baptized as soon as possible. Well, I thought since we had a baptism, I'd throw that in there. Being a Baptist and everything. But since you are a person who has chosen to follow Jesus, this would be the next thing. And so sometimes the way we serve the Lord is by being a testimony for him. And so I would encourage you in that. But I'd like you to take a few moments to fill that out, if you would. Take a few moments to consider that.